Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Kevin Moore Show. Now, on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Kevin Montague. Now, Kevin is an author, scholar, artist, and scientist who has had two near death experiences, which opened his mind to how the world works, as well as the science behind various topics, including what causes cancer. Now, his 20-year journey dealing with the chronic disease process has led him to his book, The Master's Key, taking science into the next 40 years to come. Kevin Montague, welcome to the show.
Hello, Kevin Moore. I'm glad to be here.
The two Kevins, right?
Yeah, two Kevins here.
I love that exchange of energy. Well, you're a lovely guy. I've got to know you a little bit just over the past week or two, since we started talking to each other to get you on. You've got a fascinating story. I'm going to give you the floor and let you talk about, the two near-death experiences that you've had and the journey that you've been on. There is absolutely no way that we're going to get that all in one interview, right? Because there's
Right,
so much
it's
to your
going to be
story,
long.
right?
Yeah,
I found you from, I believe I heard you on Coast to Coast with George Noory. You've been,
nice guy.
yeah, absolutely lovely guy. You've been around for
Lovely guy.
a lot longer than that, than just one interview. Just recently, you've been doing this for a long, long time, trying to, getting your story out there. I actually saw videotape of you back in the day, when YouTube was just 10 minutes long a piece.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you were
I
trying to
remember
fit your
doing those. Yeah,
story into 10 minutes. It was like, wow, how's he going to do this? I've got to watch this, right? But you actually released those whole interviews. I think they were released as they were filmed in the end, as the whole 1 hour 40 minutes.
right.
But okay, well, your first near death experience took place in 1981. We're going to get into that, and your second near death in 2001, which in the end led you to write the Master's Key, which is a book that's only available on your website. We're linking all that in the description below. Your book's going to come up on the screen. Your website is
KFFMenterprises.com
okay,
is,
right? Well,
and yeah, oh, you can, when you go to the website, just click on the healthcare tab. It's a real easy website to work. You'll see books and ebooks. If you click on that, you'll see my book and also another book by Dr. Rick Santee, who worked with me to help me get my health back. And he's a naturopath doctor, and he has quite a story to tell himself.
yes, absolutely, absolutely, and yes, you mentioned him, Santine, in your documentation as well. So, okay, going back, let's just go back prior to 1981. Let's go back to your education and all that, living at home, parents, and everything else, because that plays a little bit of a part of your journey where you were mentally at the time of 1981, right? So,
Right.
what was growing up like? What was that? I mean, I know there was a divorce, wasn't there, at some point? But what was that journey like leading up?
Well, growing up, I was an abused child by my mother. I got beatings like every 6 to 8 weeks from her. And she had a lot of problems. She grew up in Rockaway Beach. And her family, her mother was Italian and her father was Irish, and those type of tempers, when they flew, things flew through the house, uh, to give you some idea. And I think she probably faced some abuse when she was growing up. So she was kind of, and when I look back, she was living stuff through, playing it out on me when I was growing up. But I didn't know that. I only know that now when I look back and see what was going on in her mind. But she married a wonderful man, my father, Patrick R. Montague. He worked in insurance as a claims adjuster. And all of us in the family, I do have a brother, Patrick Vincent. My father is Patrick R. My mother is Patricia. It's funny, I have three Patricks, and the name Patrick means noble or nobleman. And I learned in the light that these were assigned to me because I'm a king and a lord in the light. I'm older than this life I'm living, I found out. I've had other life's journeys in my particular case, and I was sent here to help this world at a key time when it needs me and what I can do for it, and it's done. That book I wrote, The Master's Key, is the main reason why I was allowed to come back, to bring this knowledge that all of you have been praying for to solve these disease problems. And not just cancer, but CFS, fibromyalgia, Crohn's disease, heart disease, all the rest of it. And Yeah, growing up was interesting because I had bad eyesight. I had asthma as a child, so I was always picked last on the sports teams, and which always was hard for me to deal with. The asthma kept me indoors a lot. Because when the air was bad, they didn't want me out breathing the bad air. So I would read, and I would read a lot, and that's how I became a scholar, sitting indoors all the time, reading book after book after book. And I didn't really want to go that path, but that's what they told me to do as a little Catholic boy going to Catholic school. And I can now look back and see why it all had to happen the way that it did. So the marriage with my parents was good for about up to this, I was 7 years old. Then it started to go bad. And then by the time I was 10, they divorced. My mother wanted a divorce. And she even lied to the judge, telling the judge that, my father was beating me when she was beating me. But no one ever brought me into court, to tell what was going on. Through an odd event, when I was living with her, I burned down our Christmas tree with one of my science experiments. And it caused the courts to change their mind and put us in the hands of my father. So the lie that she gave actually turned against her in the end, and we wound up with my dad as the main parent, taking care of both of us.
Was that a more peaceful part of your life in that sense when you stayed with dad?
Yes.
Yeah.
My mother was hell on wheels to deal with. She had a really good side,
Of
Kevin,
course.
but she also had a really bad side. There was nothing in the middle about her. She was either really bad or really good. Her good
Yeah.
side was great.
Well,
Her bad
she was
side,
going through her own stuff, wasn't she? I guess.
yeah, her brother committed suicide when I was about almost 4 years old. He came into our home one night. He worked for the Los Angeles Police Department at that time. And he came into the front bedroom where his son was sleeping, my cousin, first cousin. And he pulled out his revolver and blew his brains out in front of his son. And unfortunately, his boy was awake and saw the act committed. I heard the gunshot go off when I was in the back bedroom. And when I came out to see what was going on, there was a bunch of police officers and stuff. So they put me back in the bedroom. And next thing I saw was my cousin coming out with tears pouring down his eyes. And the reason why I bring him up is because he became my caregiver through this for about 15 years. And I was grateful to have him till he died about 10 years ago. And unfortunately, he committed suicide too. And I want you to know, I learned in the ethereal realm of the spirit that the demons are real. And a demon of suicide had been assigned to him and his dad and his family. There were three of them, actually. And in an out-of-body experience, I had to get rid of that demon. That was an interesting encounter. When I got rid of it, our Lord appeared in the house and lit the whole place up and then filled me in on what was going on. So meeting Jesus face to face is quite an experience. I want you to know. Everyone wants to meet him, but he's interesting. He's very down to earth when you talk to him. He's just like you and I talking to each other right now. So he's not a holier than thou God or anything. He gets angry, he gets upset, he gets happy, he laughs. He's just like the rest of us. So when he talks to you and he's being stern with you, he really wants you to pay attention to what he wants you to learn from a situation. So
Right. And did you get to have closure with your mother in the end?
Not really. When she died, because this chronic disease process that I mastered and talk about in the Master's Key caused trauma to my body before I figured the whole thing out, to how the process works. So I suffer even right now while I'm talking with you with a herniated disc, 2 inguinal hernias, and a few other problems. And so I have to take pain medication. And the point being, to answer your question, was I couldn't get to her before she died. I was in way too much pain. But she did call me on the phone. And to my great surprise, she called me and said, "I'm going to hell." And she was in a dead panic. And see, when I was in the light, I was shown this. that my parents and my brother were teeter-tottering between heaven and hell. And that's one of the reasons I came back, the main reason I came back at age 25.
And when you say about the demonic side as well, is that another word for attachments?
No, these are beings. These are actual beings that exist. I suppose the Bible talks about a race that existed before man was created on this earth, and they would be that race, and they followed Lucifer. I asked the light about all of this, and the light's funny. It's like Hal the computer, from the movie. The light is always polite and kind to you. And when I asked about the devil, he says, "Do you wish to see him?" And I said, "No." And then I asked about heaven, about Hades and hell, and the light said, "Yes, they exist. Do you wish to see them?" And I said, "No, I've had enough trauma on the earth. I don't need that scarring my mind to have to see all of that."
But do you think that heaven or hell? Do you think they're just if we wish to go to hell, if we feel that we're not worthy, and that we think of a hell really existing, then when we cross over, whatever word you want to use for it, go home, whatever, right, or a bunch of words, that actually we're creating that reality because we can create realities when we cross over. So that's a reality if we want to create that, just like that film where dreams may come.
The reality exists separate from us. Our Lord did create it, but he did not create it for us. He created it for Lucifer and his followers, which is accounted for in the Bible. I had that confirmed when I was in the light. And but there's something I don't understand, Kevin, because our Lord could have stopped the whole encounter in the Garden of Eden. By the way, that was real. And he didn't. And I think he should have, because if he had, then all of this mess of the earth being tied into Lucifer's judgment would have been stopped. We wouldn't have all the problems. We'd have a really incredible world, an incredible planet, with him guiding us as the Lord of the creation. I remember George Noory always using the word, this entity. He said, Jesus, whatever. And I thought in my mind, no, George, this is the Son of God. This is far more than just an entity. It's just the light can condense itself down into a persona and appear before you, and it chose to be the one we call Jesus for this world only, though.
Okay, but when other NDE experiencers have come forth with their stories, obviously they've not come from a religious background. They may have come as an atheist or whatever, maybe even spiritual, right? But they don't have that experience of the heaven and hell in a sense. It is just what it is, a place of no judgment, unconditional love, and so much more. Those realities didn't exist in their experience.
Right. No, I understand that. When you go, here's the one thing about the light. The light will become whatever you're focused on. So if you wish to see a loved one that you knew before you died, the light will summon that loved one to you. It doesn't create it. The loved one comes to you, because the whole issue of time and space is kind of discharged when you go out of your body. There is a sense of time and space, like we're doing right now, talking to each other, but there isn't, because even Jesus could be talking to everyone in the universe all at the same time, never miss a beat, and you wouldn't know that he was doing that, because he's not limited to time and space. See, so when people go into the light and they have these experiences, they are actually summoning whatever they're focused on. Now, the ones that go to hell are the ones that were self-centered in life, selfish, everything that's negative, and they automatically send themselves to that place that the Lord created. So it's another chamber inside the light that exists as this place called hell. Go ahead.
Okay, but you have talked about previously as well that even those who have murdered or done heinous crimes to others, they're still accepted into the light and with as much love as we would or anyone else would have.
Yeah, the light knows the details of every single one of us. So I'm not even qualified to judge every single person that goes into the light. In fact, I think God's grace is wonderful, because when I listen to some of these stories of people who have done these things and they get to meet Jesus, they even tell you in their story they got to meet Jesus. They couldn't believe it because they thought they'd go to hell for what they had done. And I thought, that's God's grace, unmerited favor. And I don't know enough about you or anyone else out there to be able to judge them.
But I'm sure you've said, and I'm personifying your words, so apologies for that. I'm sure you've said that
Yeah,
even those that have committed murders, that it's not what we do here is not kind of equal to where we've come from. There's karmic patterns being worked out. There's all sorts of things at a deeper level going on that we're not aware of on this level.
that's correct. Yeah. If you put the hell issue aside and you just take in the ambience of what God is, both as this being of light, this formless light that became everything, and you look upon the immensity of what the light became, not just our heaven that we get to go to, but all the heavens that apply to every single inhabitable planet in the universe. That's what I was trying to tell George Noory. Every single planet that has sentient life has its own personal heaven. I mean, you wouldn't send someone from another world to our heaven. They would never understand it. But that's a lot of Swiss cheese, I told George. I said, it's a lot of chambers inside the light. And we're just one chamber, this big universe to a relative size, just one chamber inside the light that the Bible refers to as the tree of life. I like the Bible's terminology to a point, but there's other stuff I have to throw in from our science, being a scientist, that I also favor.
Right.
To try to explain all of this. Yeah.
I do want to give the floor to you. Let's just finish off the recap, just getting to 1981 then. So where did you go to uni to study?
Well, I studied, I went to 4 grade schools growing up because of the divorce, the problems in the family. When I wound up with my father, I chose to go to Notre Dame High School. I could have gone to Don Bosco Tech in Riverside, California here, because they had a really good progressive technical class situation. But I went to Notre Dame because they were a college prep school. They were good both in the arts and sciences, and I did enjoy that time, and finally got a state scholarship. And chose to go to Loyola University. But oddly enough, I would have loved to have gone to the Juilliard School of Music because I love music and I love composing. But I couldn't get a scholarship there, so I stayed here and went to Loyola University. And went after the arts and sciences. I eventually settled on the technical communication arts and sciences because I saw a future there. But later on, I had hoped to get my doctorate work done. I was thinking in medicine and also computer science. And I'm there anyway, in spite of the fact I didn't get the formal degree. And the master's key makes for a heck of a thesis. If you get to, when you read it, it's very well done. I'm very pleased the way it came out. So.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So in 1981, let's go to August 19th, 1981. You're 25. Where were you at 25? What were you doing leading up to this first NDE?
Well, let's see. I was living in North Hollywood, sharing an apartment with a friend of mine I'd met in college. He worked for the American Song Festival. His name is Kevin L. Norwood. We're still very good friends to this day. And we were both interested in the music industry at that time. So we were trying to get deals and make deals happen. I was composing and working with a private publisher and a few other people. And all of that changed because it moved right into the NDE experience when I was living with him, sharing the expenses. And if you want, I can move right into that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And had you ever come across the words near-death experience before? Was it in your psyche at all?
I think I had first heard the term from Raymond Moody, but I really didn't really focus in on it all that much. So it was not something I was really totally familiar with at that point in time.
Okay. Well,
okay, so...
Yep. I'll let you take us into your near-death experience, the first one, and what occurred, what happened.
Yeah, okay. What happened was one night I came in to the apartment. It was a studio apartment, 2-level apartment. I went up the stairs to my room, and all of a sudden I was getting this really bad pain in my left side, and it was getting worse. And really bad fast. And I thought, oh, God, now what? I was thinking in my life. And I lied down on the bed. I thought maybe it'll go away, and it didn't. So I picked up the phone, and my friend Kevin, another Kevin, was at a party. and told him what was going on. I said, I'm in trouble. And he says, I'll be there right away. So when he came in, the pain was really bad. And he said, well, what do we do? And I said, why don't you take me over to my mother? In spite of the relationship I had with my mom, she did have, like I said, a really good side, a really bright side. So I said, maybe she'll know what to do. So he put me in the car and we drove over to her place. And when we got in, she was very loving, very supportive. And she said, let's get him over to the hospital because this isn't getting any better. So we went over to Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. They loaded me in the car and checked me in. And my mother had doctors there that she trusted and knew. So they put me into a bed and, did all the preparation work and stuff. And finally, 3 doctors came in and they all looked at me scratching their heads saying, well, what's up? And I told them and they said, well, it might be your kidneys. It could be something else, maybe your GI tract or your muscles. He said, what do you think about doing a pyelogram? And I said, what's that? And it's a pyelogram cystoscope is what they do. And that's where they put a tube up through the penis, up into the bladder, up into the kidneys. And they look for, any growths or stones and stuff. And I wasn't that knowledgeable about that then. So, but they gave me a quick rundown. They said, are you opposed to that? I said, no, that's fine. I said, when do you want to do it? So we'll do it tomorrow morning. So they gave me medication to try to ease the pain. And had me up at 6 o'clock in the morning and put me on a gurney and wheeled me into the operating room. And Kevin, I hadn't seen an operating room in a while. As a kid, I had bad eyesight and I had some other surgery. I had 2 surgeries on my eyes and other surgeries. So this was kind of a new experience. I was at a different level in my life of consciousness. And we're going into this operating room and I'm looking at everything. And then they stopped the gurney while the nurse ran ahead of me to get some stuff done. And that's when I said a prayer to our Lord. And I said, Jesus, I always talk to him. I've been doing it since I was a kid because nobody ever played with me or wanted to be with me. So I had to talk to someone. I talked with him. And I said, Jesus, I'm not where I'm supposed to be in my life. I was supposed to be in music and in show business. And I knew that as a boy. And I love the technical side of stuff too. I said, but this all feels wrong. And I really would like to see you and talk with you. If it's possible, I didn't know what would happen. So the nurse came back as I finished that and they stuck a 3-inch long needle into this hand, which hurt really badly. And then I guess they were hooking an IV up to me and they wheeled me over to the table they were going to put me on, and they transferred me. And overhead were all these big lights, that they have. And just as they were about to knock me out, this anesthesiologist comes up to me, and he's upside down from the way I'm looking at the ceiling, right? Because he's standing over me. And it's a young guy, and he says to me, Kevin, he calls me by my first name. He says, Kevin, we're going to hit you with sodium pentothal. And he said, do you know what that is? I said, I think so. And he said, well, we're going to bring you about this close to death, he said, but we're going to be here. So don't be afraid or worried about anything. I said, no, I'm not. It's all right. And so he said, all right, start to count back from 100. And I did. And Kevin, I got about maybe to 93, 94, somewhere in there. And all of a sudden, those lights over the operating room literally exploded into light all around me. It was like an explosion when it happened, but there was no sound to it. It just was boom. And all of a sudden, I'm standing in all of this light all around me. I'm very much awake. This is no dream. I've been transported instantly into this place. And I'm looking around a little disoriented at first, going, where am I, And then I started to think this place looks familiar. And it does, because the last thing I remembered before being born was the light, oddly enough. As a boy, a little kid growing up, I always had that one memory, but nothing else. And so this is like familiar ground, but I'm still disoriented. So I'm looking straight up into the light. And I'm watching what look like bluish waves moving through the light, very faint bluish waves. And from peak to peak is about maybe 100 light years of distance in the light. And I'm receiving this information from the light. I'm being told what I'm seeing at all times. And I'm looking deeper and deeper into the light, and all the questions that were in my mind when I was on the earth were being answered at incredibly rapid speed. Answer after truth after truth after truth. And all of a sudden, my beliefs are diminishing and fading away, and replacing them is all this knowledge of truth. And I looked deeper and deeper, and all of a sudden I went, oh, all of a sudden this passage from the Bible where Jesus said, when you do this to the least of my brethren, you do this to me. And I get it. He is the light, but he takes on human form to visit the universe, and the whole universe is located inside of him. And I went, where was I? I knew this before I was born. I knew this knowledge. Why did I forget that this was going on with me? So that part made me feel good, because I knew the location of the universe. I was getting reacquainted to what God is. And so I lowered my head and I turned over to my left, and there was this portal, very large portal. I tried to render it on my one of my computer programs, and I used it as an icon on my YouTube channel so everyone could get an idea of what I was seeing. And it had this fuzzy, misty edge around it. And all of you were there. There was the earth with the sun shining on it, and it was stable. And I thought, that's really odd, because the earth and all the planets are moving at a great speed, right? But I'm standing here looking at a stable, three-dimensional opening image so that means the light was moving with everything and keeping a stable image for my sake. And I thought that was astounding. I thought it was amazing. So I looked at the portal, and it was very big. It was big enough to put a semi-truck through. And then I turned 180 degrees back over to my right. And all of a sudden, another portal opens up. And it's a much darker, denser, bluish light. And it parts from the middle out like this, like a drape opening. And I don't know why it did that. And the one who stepped out of it is the one that we call Jesus. And immediately I had perfect knowledge to who I was in the presence of. I had no doubts to who was stepping out of this thing. And he was made of bluish, silvery white light when he stepped out of it, to offset his form from the light all around us so I could see him. And this is where the Christ element comes in. And we could talk a long time about that part of it, the part that's between God and man. But he steps forward towards me, Kevin, and while he's walking towards me, entire planets are blasting out of his torso. And the sound was deafening. There was lightning, thunder, smoke. And I watched a whole planet be made out of pure white light and get formed and get slowly sent into the universe. And old planets were coming back from the universe and getting reabsorbed back into his torso. And he was trying to tell me, do you get it? I am the creation. I am the creator. I'm the whole thing, kid. You can't survive without me. And I'm going, yes, sir, I get it. You've made the point very clear. So as he smiled, he gave me kind of a smile. But keep in mind, his head was like this blazing ball of light. I could hardly even see his face from this head of light that he was transmitting off of him. And he walks over more to my right side, almost parallel up with the portal behind me. And he starts to scan me. The light rays off of his face start going up and down my being. And he finally lands right on the center of my chest. And that's where I carried all the heartache from the earth, from all the hurts that everyone had done to me. And he sends a blast of light from his face. It goes right into my chest, grabs all the pain, and keeps right on going. So he took all the pain away. And I went, oh, man, that feels good, And then he looks at me, and it's like he's searching me for the most deepest question and concern I have about my life. So the first words he spoke to me telepathically were, your salvation is secure. And he said it with a straight face. In other words, don't worry about it. You're fine. And that made me feel better, because I knew I hadn't done everything perfect. Like you mentioned, we all do these things, even murderers, and I'm standing in the presence of the Lord who created it all, who represented himself here when he came here. And so he says, your salvation is secure. And while we started to converse a little bit telepathically, and then when we focused on my life, he looks at me and he says, "It's wrecked," meaning my life. In other words, you were right to call upon me because the whole thing is not where it's supposed to be. And while he says that, the light all around us starts to become this lighter blue and darker blue. And other beings, men, and he's wearing, by the way, what looks like a caftan. It's the only way I can think of, with a gold band going around his waist. It's very lovely looking that he was wearing. And the others come out of the light too, and they all kind of gather around him to talk about my situation. Now, they did not let me hear what they were talking about. They cut me off from that, except prior to that, when I learned I could have had the life I wanted on the earth, I was very upset. I was kind of throwing a bit of a temper tantrum, going, damn, I could have had what I wanted. I could have had what I wanted. And he just had his arms folded in front of him going, okay, what are we going to do with you, type of thing. While he went and talked with the others that came out of the light. So while they were talking, I had nothing to do. So I started conversing with the light. And what caught my attention was suddenly the light started to make an opening appear, and there were planets, three-dimensional whole planets, alive. These weren't dead memories. When the light remembers things, it remembers it in living form. And I'm looking at this just amazed, going, wow, that's cool, And the light's telling me, these are two other planets you were on before you came to the Earth. And we needed you here because you're more advanced than most that are on the Earth, and your knowledge is exceptional, and so forth. And I said, okay, I got all of that. I was about to ask more about the two worlds when suddenly Jesus broke from his powwow, I call it, with the others he was talking to. And now I can see this big smile on his face. So they've made a decision. And he waves his arm like this and he says, come on home. In other words, you don't have to go back and go through anymore. We've got this thing sorted out. And I thought, I'm not going to argue with him. I don't really have any desire to come back here at age 25 because of how badly everything went. So he walks over to me, puts his right arm around me, and another opening opens up in the light, and it's leading into heaven. And I got to see part of the mansion in the rolling hills that I was going to come with the second death encounter. But I didn't make the connection right away of what I was seeing till I had the second death encounter. And right when he's walking with me, we're walking quietly, and my heart is broken too. I'm going, God, everything's broken. It's a mess. And suddenly the light catches my attention. I turn up like this to my right, looking straight up into the light. And this information and revelation is pouring into me about my father, my mother, and my brother. And the light is showing me they're teeter-tottering between heaven and hell. And so our Lord stops me, and he gets right in front of me. And again, his head is such a blazing ball of light. I'm like this, even with my spiritual eyes, I'm going, whoa, turn the light down. And he's very serious. And he says, what's troubling you? And I said, Jesus, it's my parents and my brother, my noblemen, I call them. They're teeter-tottering between heaven and hell. And he stopped me right there and he said, then you need to go back. He points like this, you need to go back to be sure they're going to be okay. But Kevin, I didn't want to come back because when you're in the light, you feel all this peace, this love, this euphoria. And as you said, the unconditional love, you're accepted the way you are. And I didn't want to suffer anymore on this planet. But I did love my parents and my brother. And I thought, all right, if I can be of any help to try to make sure they're going to be okay, I'll go back. And right in that moment, he also showed me, he created, in fact, I think that was before, he created this blue ribbon made of silvery white light, about so wide going over to his right. And it had a slit going through it, and the ribbon was open in the ends. And what the light told me is the ribbon represents your eternal life in me, and the slit represents your current incarnation as Kevin Montague. And I said, I understand. And then the Lord, who's standing over here with this ribbon going over here, looks to the ribbon and nods his head. And all of a sudden, the slits start to expand out through the course of the ribbon. And Kevin, all of a sudden, it was like the this mind expanding experience. All of a sudden, my mind's going, whoa, I'm going, all of a sudden, all this stuff of what I knew of myself before I was born was being restored to my mind. But he stopped the slits halfway through the course of the ribbon. And then he looked at me and he said, if I go further, he said, you can't go back. You'll know too much and it'll be too painful for you to be on the earth. So be sure about what you want. And I said, no, I want to go back and make sure, my parents and brother are going to be okay. He said, okay, then I'll stop it right here. But this knowledge that he explored helped me to write the Master's Key. That's why I bring it in, because part of that knowledge comes from the other worlds that I was on and how the universe works. So when he was finished with that, and he told me to come back, that's when I started to fall back through the infamous tunnel. You hear NDEs talk about this dark tunnel. And he's standing as I'm moving at rapid speed with him going into the distance. He raises his hands up like this, which I understand is the healing posture of our Lord when he imparts healing onto you. And he says very kindly, he says, if you need me for any reason, I wait in earnest to hear from you and to eagerly help. And I kept coming at tremendous speed. I came through the portal into space again. It was cool to see, too. You could see all the planets and everything. And came at rapid speed back to this planet, right back into the hospital. I knew exactly where to go. And when I came into the hospital room, I landed on the gurney with a thud. And the reason why I bring that up is because everything's interdimensional between our physical realm and that realm. So you can hit something if you focus on it. And I did. I wanted to be on the gurney and I came at a thud. And but I didn't feel any pain or anything. And I looked at where I was. I said, okay, I got to levitate my body and, slip myself back into the position. My body was lying like this, not on its side, and I landed on my side. So I lifted myself up, levitated, lined myself up, and then lowered myself back into my body. And the first thing I hear is I can hear the heart pumping, the blood and everything moving through my body. It's a machine. We interface with it, and it's just a machine. Yeah. And the next thing I do is I open my eyes, and I'm blind. I can't see a thing. And I went, oh, my God, I'm blind. And I had to wait a full minute before I could see. And when I could see, all of a sudden I heard this buzzing sound in my ears. And this fascinates me. My eyes literally digitized from the outside going in. And that surprised me because we have analog systems. Our brain is analog, our eyes are analog. I never thought of them as being digital. But what I saw was like a digital activation process going on with my eyes. And suddenly I'm looking up at the ceiling, wondering where I am. And I feel this thing on my face. It's the oxygen mask. So I pull the oxygen mask off and turn over on my side. But I couldn't remember anything right away because I didn't have access to my brain. See, once you get into your body, you're now enslaved back to your body again. Your spirit is no longer, it's in other words, being submissive to the body. That's a good word too. It's being submissive. So I couldn't remember anything quite right away. And then I looked at the clock. I couldn't remember what that was called. And suddenly then everything switched on in my brain. And I looked at the clock and I said, oh, that's right. That's a clock that's used for measuring linear time. But here's the fascinating thing about the clock. The clock, when I did become conscious of what it was pointing at 2:57 on the clock. And that's the exact hour I was born, in the afternoon. And this was all happening in the afternoon. I didn't notice that right away. I picked up on that later on. I'm just giving you what happened before I started figuring it out. And while I'm sitting on my side, either this Asian nurse or doctor comes up with her mask on, and she's attending to my IV. And she looks at me and she says, oh, Mr. Montague, she's so glad to have you with us. And I was thinking in my mind, why did she say it that way? Was so glad to have you with us. And I said, well, how long was I out? Oh, she says, you out about 3 hours, Mr. Montague. And then she looks at my eyes because they must have still been dilated by the sodium pentothal. And she says, oh, it looks like you have another 30 minutes with us. And I said, oh, okay. I kind of got the message, You're not quite with us yet is what she's saying. We can see that by looking at your eyes. So I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to go. I'm sleepy. I'm going to go lie down. back, lie down and go to sleep. And as I started to doze off, all of a sudden, Kevin, I hear an audible voice, well, in my body, no less. And it's very loud and it's very commanding. And it says, Montague. It talks like this. And I go, whoa. And at 25 years old, I'm going, whoa. It says, don't go to sleep. Think about what you just experienced. And it's like this. It's a very commanding voice. And I'm going, yes, sir. I popped up in the gurney, ripped the oxygen mask off my face, going, whoa. And I'm going, what is this, And all of a sudden, I'm looking at the wall right across from me, and all the tiles start to disappear one by one at rapid speed. And I go, I must be having an hallucination, I'm thinking to myself. And all of a sudden, this beautiful stairway made of transparent gold, just like John the Apostle tried to describe in his book called Revelation, it appears. And this golden light is filling the entire recovery room. And this beautiful ball of golden light comes down the stairs and comes into the room and blinds the place with this light. I couldn't see anything but this golden light, and touches everybody that is in this recovery room. And then it goes back up into the stairwell and then retreats, and then the wall reassembles. And I looked at that and I said, what in the world was that all about? I still don't think I fully understand that one, although I've figured out most of the other stuff. So anyway, when that thing ended, they finally wheeled me out and wheeled me back to my room. And that finished kind of part one of the first death encounter. This thing has two parts, because the second part happened about 4 weeks later. And I got a visit on the ocean side. And this was a powerful thing. And this is something you would hear the kids from Fatima talk about. Go ahead.
Let me just ask you one question as well. So when you woke up, did you, how long was it? We'll get back to the ocean part. How long was it before you started to recall the experience you had?
Like I said, there was a minute or so where I was subject to my brain. And I couldn't remember anything. I was like a kid. I felt like a baby. I knew nothing in those few minutes. Then all of a sudden, my brain kicks in. And then I go, oh, I was just in the light, as well. And I'm going, I had trouble orientation because I knew I'd come from the light, but didn't know. This is hard to explain. And then the physical kicks in, and that takes over. So now the two are connecting. The spirit mind and the physical mind are connecting, and they're one. And I've got the whole thing. Okay, fine. I said, I left my body, went into the light, came back, and now I'm getting access to the database of my brain so I can operate in this planet. So,
how long before you told any loved ones or any friends of what had happened? Was there any sort of discussions in the hospital what had happened?
Oh, I didn't tell anyone for quite a while. I didn't think anyone would listen to me or believe me, given the way this world works. With all the different religions and different faiths and what I had gotten exposed to, I thought, oh, no, I'm just going to hold this to myself. However, I do remember after I got out of the hospital, I did talk a little bit about it with my mother to see how she could handle it. And she just listened. She didn't really say anything. I didn't tell her much, except to what I experienced. And all she said was, baby, I always told you walked under the hand of God. She said, why wouldn't you have such an experience? And I thought, well, that's promising. I wasn't sure what to think. So I said, all right, well, I'll let it go for now.
Well, actually,
then,
just got to ask this. When you were coming back into your body, did you see any sort of surgeons around you, or was the body just sort of on its own, waiting to wake up, basically?
Yeah, the body was on its own. It's like a machine, just like a car in idle with no driver. So it was functional because, the body is perfect on its own. But it had nothing in it. We're the souls. We drive these things while we're in it. And then when we leave, they're like rag dolls. They can't do anything. So people shouldn't focus so much on their bodies. They should focus on who they are really as spiritual beings, beings of light.
So leading up to the ocean scene, then, obviously you must have, were you contemplating, what the hell am I doing with my life? What did this mean? Who am I? No more fear of death, maybe. Am I living in purpose? Were any of these things going on inside
Oh,
your?
all of it. Yeah, that particular morning I couldn't sleep, and it hadn't been easy. I was staying at my mom's place, and the man that she was with, they were having problems. So one morning I just got out of there, drove my car to this place I always loved to go to at Dockweiler Beach. It was just below Venice Beach, California, and
A quiet place.
a quiet place. Usually there's nobody there, and I can just sit there, and I just usually talk out loud to our Father in heaven or to Jesus. So nobody thinks I'm nuts, sitting there talking. And this one morning, I went down there, and I got close to the shoreline. And just as I approached the ocean, I said out loud in a loud voice, I said, "Father, I know you can hear me." Because after the experience, I said, "Oh boy, no, I know he can hear me." And I said, "But I need to know something from you." I said, "I've been alone all my life. I've always been, I had kind of smarter than most of the other kids, some creative intelligence that I don't fully understand. And I need to know there's somebody here that has faith in me." I said, "I know you have faith in me, and I have faith in you, but I'm human, and being here, I've been alone for so long, for 25 years. I didn't do much dating growing up because what I went through as a kid made me withdraw and become quite shy. And but I had all this scholastic ability, which is wonderful. And I finished saying that, and I was just approaching the ocean side, and there was like this low fog, Kevin, sitting where the waves were breaking as I walked onto the shore. And the sand was packed hard enough that I could walk on it. So I started walking northbound towards Venice Beach that morning. And as I started to walk, all of a sudden the fog started to move fast at rapid speed, and it engulfed me. It just went around me, and it became this cylinder, and I was watching it go twisting like this in front of me and behind me. I turned real fast and looked, and it's going, whoo, it's doing this, and it's making a sound. And I'm going, whoa, what is going on? I'm looking around at this thing, and I'm watching the seagulls fly in and out of it now. They're coming into the opening. I think there was a clearing of maybe about 10 or 15 feet, maybe more. And I'm looking at the seagulls floating around, and all of a sudden, as though it was a telepathic message being received when I was in the light, this voice, but not audible, just a voice coming into my mind saying, "Look down at your feet. There's a message written for you in the sand." And I was looking straight ahead, and I went, "No, there's no message there." And I started to look down slowly with my eyes and hear these large letters, one at a time. They're going bam, 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 bam. And I turned around and looked behind me, and I couldn't read the darn thing. So I started to walk over to my left where the waves were breaking. Kevin, as I walked towards the waves would break around me. They would not allow my feet to get wet. This was quite a miracle that was going on. And I took it all in. I thought, well, okay, I appreciate that, so I can step back further and see this thing. And they're written in capital letters like we do on the internet when I think about it these days, were the simple words, "your," then a publisher's insert mark with the word "mother" going over it. And then it continued to say, "has faith in you. Your mother has faith in you." There was the answer to what I just asked. Isn't that amazing? He knew I was going to be there and ask that question. And I looked at that and I thought, whoa. And then I said out loud, I said, "Yeah, but she always beat me up when I was a kid. How could she have faith in me?" So as I'm looking at this message in the sand, I turned to my left, and now the fog has expanded. And meaning the radius has increased, and it has become this wall of fog, almost like half a football's length going down the length of the beach, several feet thick, but it's shaped in the form of a wall. I still don't understand that to this day. I went up to it and I put my hand in it. I was curious to see what it would do, and it disturbed it, and then it reassembled and continued to keep its shape. So I thought to myself, now comes my scientific curiosity. I said, what's around this thing? Because I'm right at the edge of it. So I go around the wall. I peek around the wall, because I'm a little scared, and I'm going, well, and there's nothing to be afraid of. So I go around the wall, and now the wall's behind me because I've stepped in front of it. And there, sitting over the ocean, is a hole in time and space, like the portals I saw when I was in the light. And coming out of this hole or this portal, which is leading into another sky, so it's like looking through a time portal into another planet, I think. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what I was looking at. There's these steps made of water coming out of this hole in time and space, just hovering over the ocean waves. And I'm looking at the water thinking, who in the world would want to step on those steps and step into the ocean? It seems crazy to me. And so I looked at it, and all of a sudden it started to close, and it closed like the aperture of the slits of a camera is the best way. Meaning the fog around it took on an impression and became like these slits of a camera, and it's spinning slowly, very quietly, and then seals itself up. So I've learned when God does miracles, it's not like Hollywood or, it's very quiet, it's very peaceful. It's not, fire and smoke and everything else. So this thing closes up. And right at that point, the cylinder of fog I was in, whatever you want to call it, tunnel of fog, releases itself. It dissipates. The wall dissipates. The message in the sand is still sitting there. And I'm standing there on the ocean side wondering what the whole thing was about. And suddenly, I didn't tell George Noory this because I can't think of everything all the time, but I'm going to tell you. All of a sudden, I feel this jab in my left side. So someone took their elbow and jabbed me, but there's no one I can see that's standing there. And I hear this voice say, well, thank him. He just did a powerful miracle for you. And I went, oh, I said out loud, thank you, Lord. I said, thank you for doing what you did. I don't understand what it means, but thank you. And that's one of the angels. You can't see them, but they're standing there, and that was a physical jab. I went, whoa, I went, geez, who hit me? It was like somebody punched me, but he was trying to get my attention. And I'm sure it was a male angel because the way he punched me, telling me, thank him. So I did. And that was the end of the part of the experience. Now, all these things later on had significance, especially the publisher's insert mark. Because look at the book that I've written. I didn't know I was going to write this book. But he did, see. That's why he wanted me to know that when it happened, I would be in the right place doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay, then. Well, thank you for that. So let's move. Obviously, your next near-death experience was in 2001, February 2001. So let's kind of move forward towards that. And had you been, up to that point, talking publicly about your experience much, your first near-death experience, or was that more of a private thing and, it wasn't really your focus at that point?
It was more private. I really didn't think anyone was going to listen. I did eventually reveal what happened to my brother and his wife because I knew that I had come back to reach both my parents and my brother. My mother was difficult because I would try to hint to Jesus when she had parties and stuff, and she'd always make fun of me saying, oh, there's Kevin with his Jesus thing again. She talked like this, and I'd have to bear it, God, if only she could see what I had seen. But I had to be very gentle with her and very patient.
So how had that first experience prior to the second one changed you as a person, or did you need another baseball bat over the head to get the message for the second time?
It's not that God was hitting me over the head with anything. It's just that I had asked for assistance and he was rendering the assistance is how I look at it. When I had the second death encounter, that's when I bought bad meat at a local Vaughn's Pavilion near my home here. And the meat was loaded with parasites, I found out later on. And
did you ever sue them? Did you ever sue them for that, or did you ever?
Yes, I teamed up with an attorney, 3 attorneys actually. We were supposed to go to court on December 7th of 1997, and my expert witness, Dr. Richard K. Gordon, was supposed to appear in court, and he had endoscopy and colonoscopy images that would have made for an out-of-court settlement. It was so clear what had gone into my body from the meat. So my attorneys were prepared to make the arguments and win. Unfortunately, though, 2 months right before the court date, he backed out. And I was sitting in the attorney's office because I was still ambulatory, with my health. And all three attorneys, when they found out, because we got it over the phone, they all looked at each other and said, "He's taking a bribe." They all said it in unison. And I said, "You're kidding." And my attorney, Tom Blue, looked at me and he said, "No, Kevin." He said, "Unfortunately, most of the time when events like this happen, the insurance companies just pay out and settle. But 5% of the cases wind up in a scenario like this where your expert witness doesn't show up because he's been bought out. Because, an honorable man would show up in court with the images, but a dishonorable man would not. So I had to fight on my own from that point on with absolutely no financial help from the grocer, even though I had an ironclad evidence and everything else.
What was the outcome from that?
Well, eventually it was dropped as a nuisance claim,
right,
with the grocer because we didn't have our expert witness to be able to go into court.
So I've mentioned that the next near-death experience was the second, was February the 2nd, 2001. But you mentioned 1997 there, so I'll just correlate that for us. So when was the next near-death experience?
Well, the experience happened at age 44. Now that puts me at let's see, what would be the year for that? That's 1994.
So then, in 1994, you consumed some bad meat. That led on to major health issues for you. You nearly died from that, in a sense.
Correct.
Yeah. You never had.
It never stopped. What happened was once I got out of the hospital and they thought I was going to be okay, 2 weeks later I had bleeding. I was bleeding from my rectum. I was throwing up. I was having pains all over my body. So they put me back in the hospital trying to figure the thing out, and they couldn't. And it got worse and worse. And over the course of 3 years, it developed into 45 major complications. And finally, I had a meeting with my primary care physician. I remember the day he came into the office exam room, and he quietly closed the door, and he very softly looked at me and gently, and he said, "Kevin, you're dying, and we don't know what's killing you." And I said, "You're kidding." He said, "No." He said, "We've done everything we can do. Western medicine has done everything they can do." And I said, "Well, how long do I have?" And he says, "Oh, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe less, but your system's failing." And I was lost when he told me that. He said, "I'm not going to charge you for the rest of the bill." I said, "I don't think that would be fair." And so I left the office. I went downstairs into my car, and I said a prayer, of course. I said, "What is going on with you guys on the other side?" I said, "What is this? You send me back here. I came back here to try to reach my parents and my brother, and now you're sending me into this. I don't understand." So I left it at that. I drove my way home. And for the next 2 months, my energy levels diminished tremendously. I had what they call chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, pain all over my body, losing energy fast. And finally, one Sunday morning, I was lying on the floor of my living room and I couldn't get up. I said, "That's it. I don't have any strength. I'm just going to lie here and die." And I finally started to slip into a coma. And everything went black for just an instant. And when it did, suddenly I heard this female voice, this beautiful voice say, "Rise up. Your healing is waiting for you." See, I had been trying to get ready to go to a place called Healthy Discounts on Van Nuys Boulevard where I live. And I wanted to go check out some herbs they had. I've been trying things on my own through all of this, and it wasn't working. And but apparently I was supposed to be there because his voice is telling me, "Rise up." Well, Kevin, it took me an hour to rise up. I couldn't find the strength. And finally I did. I found the will, and I stood up. I got into my car. I was very disconnected from the world around me as I drove down the street. and finally got to healthy discounts. I walked in on a Sunday night, and normally they're not busy, but this night they were. And there were like 30 or 40 people in the place. And all of a sudden, it's like all these miracles that kept happening. It's like someone took the volume control over every voice and lowered them almost to nothing, so that all I could hear was this man talking to this woman. And this man is saying to her, "Madam, you have parasites in your body. I can help you with that." And she looks like about 55 years old, nice looking gal. And she says, "I don't have parasites. I'm a clean woman," and blah, blah. She's going on like this to this guy. And the reason why that was important to me is because 2 weeks later, I had been in the Tarzana emergency room with problems with my heart and other stuff. And I got a doctor, and I asked him about the spasms that were going on inside behind my rib cage where my heart was. And he says, "Well, normally those are caused by parasites," he says. And suddenly I looked at him and I said, "Oh, that's a new one on me. No one had mentioned the word parasites in all of these hospital stays I had gone through." And I said, "Well, no." He said, "Kevin, look, we're just simple county hospitals." He says, "We don't deal with that stuff. We'll just do surgery on you, give you antibiotics or whatever, and that's about all our capacity is. But this stuff's considered exotic. You have to go to a special doctor for that." So I thanked him. And the point is, 2 weeks later, I'm standing in this healthy discount with this man talking about parasites. So I gravitated towards him. And this is how I met Dr. Rick Santee. And he's a naturopath doctor. So I filled him in. We talked for about 15 minutes. He asked me if I'd ever had a live cell blood exam done. I said, "No, I don't even know what it is," although I do know what microscopy is because I've dealt with all of that in the past. And he said, "Well, we're going to do that on you to see what's going on." And so he scheduled me for a time, and I showed up with my Holter monitor on me because they were trying to find out what was wrong with my heart as well, meaning the Western medical doctors were. And so I came into his apartment where he was working, and he had this whole setup with a microscope and everything hooked up to a television. And when I sat down, and I want you to understand, I was very fatigued. I could hardly hold myself up. And this guy hands me a pad and says, "Make notes." I thought, what are you handing me a pad for? I can't even hold my consciousness level. And I said, "Oh, God, documentation. All right, let's start. That's me as a scientist. Let's start the documentation." And he takes a little bit of blood, puts it under the scope, and what I got to see surprised me because every single blood exam I had said I was normal. And here I'm looking at my blood, and my blood is not only anemic, but everything is chaining together. And oxygen can't get into blood that looks like that or functions like that. And I'm starting to get my first education of the lies that are in the Western medical system as far as their efficiency is concerned. So I'm making notes. He's calling off what he sees is going wrong in my body. And when he's all done, and I got all these notes made, I looked at him and I said, "Okay, you've given me the bad news." I said, "How hard is this thing to fix?" And he looks at me, stands up, and looks down at me. And this guy's tall too. He's got black hair, and Rick's older now these days, but he's got like the face of an angel when you look at him. And he looks at me and he says, "Kevin, actually, this thing is easy to fix. You've got parasites in your system, and we're going to have to clean your system out." So he recommended a few things. Part of the Beck protocol he recommended, and he recommended some herbal combinations. And I said, "We'll start you there." He said, "You should start with the Beck blood electrifier and start to clean your blood, and then we'll build from there." So I said, "Okay." And I was $50,000 into my credit cards then because I was trying to build an online business in the toy and game industry. I was doing publishing work as a consultant, and I had a board game called the $1 Million Bank Game in the marketplace. And that thing was so close to success. I had the main companies on board, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley, had really done my work on this. Problem was I ran into a snag with Donald Trump's game. And my next goal was to go see Donald Trump to get him to release that game from Parker Brothers so I could deal with Ron Weingartner, who was head of research and development, and do a licensing deal with them. I had everything going. It was beautiful. I was about to make my first multi-million-dollar deal. And but unfortunately, I walked into the store that had the bad meat, and it derailed everything. So,
Okay. Let me just ask you then. So obviously there's so much to this, right? And we've only got
yes,
limited human time here, right? So
right,
so so obviously this has been an ongoing from what happened back then to where we are now. You've suffered from the side effects of this for many decades, right?
correct.
Yep.
For about 2.5 decades, a little more than
Right.
2.5 decades.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. So let's move this then to 2001. What state were you in mentally, physically, and what happened at that second near death experience?
Okay, physically, I was doing well. I was overcoming the process, but a mosquito had bit me one night and complicated the thing. We had warnings in the area of mosquitoes carrying 12 deadly viruses, and one of them got in the house and bit me when my system hadn't fully recovered. And I blacked out. And when I was going to the bathroom and had to go to the hospital again, they couldn't do anything. So they sent me home. And this time, though, I had my about 45 still major complications going on in my body while I was overcoming everything. And I was lying in my bed one afternoon. My cousin, who was my caregiver, was at work. And I said, "This is it. I can't fight this." I had constant pressure around my head from the mosquito bite, and all these, my back had been damaged, and all these other damaged areas of trauma. And I was trying to stay alive, and I said, "I can't do it." So I let go. And when I did that, I was looking at the clock. I can't remember exactly, it was 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, somewhere in there. And I closed my eyes, and then I opened my eyes again, and I felt fine. And I thought, I thought I was going to die, because I've been through it before, And all of a sudden I realized, Kevin, I wasn't lined up with my body. So I knelt up on the bed. I looked down at my dead body. And as I did, this portal, a new portal opened up over the head of my bed, the baseboard of my bed. And it had a pink misty edge to it, not the misty white edge like the other one. And I knew to jump through it, and I did. And I traveled through time and space, found the other portal I had seen, 19 years earlier, went into that portal again. And this time I went deeper into the light, and I made a right turn in the light because remember, I told you there are multiple chambers inside the light, and our heaven is a particular chamber. But I knew where to go. And that's the fascinating thing about it. I knew where to go. So I made a right turn, and I come flying in, and what greeted me was what looked like the half sphere of what looks like a planet, but it isn't. And there's all these abodes, you call them paradises, what do you want to call them? But there's houses and apartments and mansions and fields and stuff, and it's just this incredibly big place. And right lifted up in the center is this light, bluish silvery white light, this intense light lighting everything up like the sun. And it reminded me of what John the Apostle said in the book. He said that the throne of the Father is lifted up above all the paradise. And I said, I get it. I can see it. And I flew in. As I started to fly in, Jesus was standing there waiting to greet me. And he was wearing again what looked like a caftan, but it had very light gold stripes going down the material. So it was white with gold. And I came right on in and landed gently next to him. In other words, I flew in. Remember, when you leave your body, the laws of this earth go away. Those laws are gone. New laws take over. That's why you're able to do this stuff when you leave your body in the ethereal realm. And I landed right next to him, and I just started talking with him, like I'd always been talking with him. And he's standing there, he's listening to me, and we're conversing. And as we're talking, I'm taking everything in that I'm looking around me. And as I look over to my right, not too far away is a forest. And now understand, everything in heaven is brighter than it is here. The reason why is because this is a denser form of light than it is there. So everything in the physical is made of the one light, but denser. So it looks darker, deeper. But when you release yourself of this, everything there is made of a lighter form of the light, a different quantum matrix, you might want to call it, okay? And so it's really beautiful the way it's lit. It's like living inside of your TV. your flat screen TV or your computer, it's lit, right? Well, that's how it looks there. It's lit. And I look over to my right, and there's a forest not too far away. From what I can see, there's not a single dead pine needle on the base floor of the forest, because there's no death in heaven. And as I start to turn more towards center, there's mountains, and they're halfway covered in snow. And there's rolling hills of grass leading up to this building over just to my left that's a 2-story mansion. And this mansion is all white on the outside with all this gold trim made of the transparent gold I had seen earlier when the stairway had appeared in the operating recovery room. And going around the mansion was a gate or fence, all made in intricate detail of this same gold. The grass was either cut low or it grew low, coming up to the fence. But then as you went outside the fence, the grass was at least 18 inches tall, because from the bottom of my feet to my knees is 18 inches. That's how I know how tall it is. And very rich green grass going on, hills and hills of grass from where I was standing. And while all of this is happening, I'm taking this in, I'm talking to our Lord, and I'm reminding him of things from his book, telling him how right he was about this passage or this thing, telling him about his wisdom, and that I agreed with him. And he just finally gave me a smile of relief, saying, good, I'm glad you finally got what I wanted you to learn by going there. So, and while he does that, all of a sudden, I feel a hand on my back, and it's a big hand, not a little hand, but a big one. And it's pushing me, and I'm going, whoa, I'm doing this. And I'm looking straight up, and I'm looking up at an angel that's double my height. And he's got golden blonde hair with locks coming down to the shoulders. And he's not even cracking a smile. And there's 2 of them standing next to each other. And he's pushing me along like, okay, enough with the talk. We've got something to show you. And I'm going like this. I felt like a little kid being pushed along. And they stand me up in front of what's like a walkway coming out of the 2 double doors or flat doors of gold leading into the mansion. And each angel gets on each side. I can't remember if they have wings or not, but I think they had swords that we were carrying. And I associate that with the warring angels of God. These guys are big, man. You wouldn't want to mess with them. Seriously. And they get on each side of the doors, and they push the doors in. And then one angel waves his hand and says, go on in, inspect. Does this meet your approval, type of thing? So I felt like a little kid walking in. I was very shyly walking in, looking around, because I've been a poor scholar all my life. I'm not used to wealth at all. And I'm greeted by this grand foyer. And Kevin, if I could describe the stones that are used, they look like marbles we use here, but the colors are exquisite, and the design work, I don't even know what to associate it with. But I walked in, and then greeting me was this grand ballroom, this huge grand ballroom where everybody can come and dance. And straight across from me was a cove, and also these 3 stained glass windows with figurines in them, which I didn't understand what they meant at that time. I suppose later I'll have it explained to me. And then in the middle is a podium with a book on it. And the book has a thick cover about this thick, and it's all gold leaf. And I knew from looking at it that it had the story of my life in it and a lot more, something for me to read. And I thought, okay, I took that in. And by this time, I'm standing in the middle of this grand ballroom. And I'm turning around looking at this, and I'm smiling. I'm going, God, I can't believe I'm here. I said, I can't believe this is real. I'm here. And it's as solid as anything we experience here on the earth. And then I look back towards where the stained glass windows are, and I look up over to my right. And there's stairs going up on the far back and the far front of the mansion with a railing going across to get to the second floor. And on the back right is 2 entryways, and I can see 2 grand pianos in each one, because the Lord knows I love music. So one's a black piano, the other's a purple one waiting for me. And then I noticed there were rooms. I'm looking around going, oh, there's guest rooms here, and you can have guests in heaven. You know, you want someone to stay with you, you want to spend time with each other. This man supplies it. But the other thing that got me was as I stood there, I looked over to my left. I know this surprised George Noory. I looked over to my left, and down on the floor over to my left was a kitchen, because you can eat in heaven. You don't have to eat in heaven, but you can if you want to. I looked that up. I looked that up even in the Bible. In John's writings, he says there's the 12 trees of righteousness that have righteous fruit on them. And they're real trees. You can eat off of those trees. And then I remember Jesse Duplantis' testimony when he was in heaven. He said the angel handed him some copper-colored fruit off a tree and said, eat this so you can withstand the glory of God as you approach the throne. And Jesse ate the fruit, see. So when I remembered those, I thought, well, then it's not so crazy, you know. But I remember Kat Kerr saying they have pizza, beer, bread, whatever you want, you know, it's there in heaven. Anything you want, the Lord supplies, you know. So I took it all in and I started to walk outside. But before I had walked in to the place, as I was talking to our Lord, there was a young boy, I remember, standing close to the mansion. And there was a little girl over further to my right. And as I looked at the boy, who looked about maybe 14 years old, he looked a lot like my brother. And the light told me, the Spirit of God told me, my brother had had an abortion with a gal he was been with. And this was the soul that they had sent back to heaven when they rejected the body. So, and this kid's like this. He's got his hands clenched. He wants so badly to talk to me. But he didn't want to disturb me talking to Jesus before I went into the mansion. And then over to my right is this little girl with this very lacy dress on, very intricate design. And that was the child my mother had lost in the miscarriage she had before she had me. So I have a sister. Yeah, I have a sister waiting for me. But I couldn't understand their ages. I'm older, and the boy's younger, and the little girl's even younger. And I would think the little girl would have been a little older than me. And I didn't get a chance to ask our Lord how the aging works between this realm and that realm. But I will when I next talk to him, because I'll be curious to know. So anyway, I walked back out of the mansion after seeing when I had seen the kids before going in. And the kids and the angels were gone. Jesus was still standing where he was sitting, and where he was standing. And I walked back over to him, and I took the whole thing in. I was very quiet about the whole thing. And suddenly this gentle wind is starting to blow from my left to right, and it's combing the grass in front of me. And I'm watching the grass fold, and there's a sheen of light coming on it. And I looked over to my left, wondering where the light was coming from, and that was the throne room, all made of bluish, silvery white light. And Kevin, I could feel the righteousness of our Father pouring out of that throne room, and it scared the hell out of me because I was aware of my sins, my shortcomings, and I could feel this righteousness. This God we serve cannot make a mistake. He's so perfect in everything, and he can't stand I guess he can't stand that in front of him unless it's covered in some way. And that's where Jesus comes in. So I'm getting all of this impression coming off of the throne room. And I thought, no, I don't want to go in there right now, maybe later. And finally, I turned to our Lord, and he finally lifts his hand, and he points to the mansion. He says, I just want you to know this is waiting for you when you are ready. And when he said that, I decided to leave, and I flew back into my bedroom through the portals again, landed at the foot of my bed. I looked at this body, which was dead, and heavily debated whether or not I wanted to get into this thing, because I came back to write the Master's Key. I hadn't finished the book. The Lord had done a miracle to tell me to do the book, and I knew you guys wouldn't figure this thing out on your own. So I finally made the decision to get back into my dead body, full of pain, which I still suffer with from some of the trauma, and completed the writing of the book, which took 15 years to write. I started before I had the second death encounter, because what happened one night was I was working on a chat board trying to work with people it's called healthyawareness.com. And I also visited Cure Zone once in a while. But I stayed with these people because what happened one day was I asked our Lord if there were others going through all this insidious suffering that I was going through. And I was sitting at my computer when that happened, and all of a sudden the computer screen glitched the second I finished the question, and I'm on this chat board. And that's God's answer. So he says, yes, look, read. So I started reading all the posts, and I said, oh my God, these people are having similar problems. But I was further down the road than they were in learning how to conquer these things. So I started chiming in with answers, answer after answer after answer. Finally, after a while, these people are thinking, what the heck is this guy? How does he know so damn much, you know? And so they started questioning me, and I started filling them in on what I had been experiencing. And I said, you people are ridiculous. Some of you are saying you've been here for 10 years and you can't get past this thing. I'm already way down the road from some of these problems you people are having. I'm trying to help you accomplish that so you can do at least what I've done so far, is what I posted back. So suddenly one day they asked me, all of them asked, or some of them did, and I asked them, and I said, I wonder if I should write a book, because this is an awful lot to teach you kids, you know. And I wrote that into one of my posts, and I got 120 responses saying, yes, write a book. Yes, write a book. Yes, write a book. And I said, oh my God, I said, I don't want to do this. I don't have the money. I don't have the money for this. I'm not a corporation powerhouse. I'm going to need documented case studies. I can't make this anecdotal. And I finally I said another prayer to our Lord, and I said, you don't want me to write a book, do you? I said, that's a lot of work, a lot of expense, you know. And I said, you already kicked me out of the last project I was working on by hitting me with the thing with the sausage, and I was this close to becoming a millionaire. And I finished the prayer and my ranting and raving to Jesus. And all of a sudden, when I finished the prayer, I had the TV on. And in the background was TBN, which I kept on just to keep me company from time to time. And all of a sudden, this very plump Hispanic gal who's talking to this black minister stops her talk just as I finished my prayer, asking whether or not I should write the book. And all of a sudden, she looks at the TV and she says, there's a man out there right now who has just prayed, and I'm quoting her word for word, who has just prayed, asking our Lord whether or not he should write the book. Our Lord wants me to tell you, write the book, and he will take care of the marketing, because I was worried about the money with the whole thing. And I went, oh, great. I said, I don't want to do this, man. This is too much work. So I stood up because I still was having trouble with my neck from a torn muscle. I decided to go to bed after that had happened. And I said, oh, yeah, right, Lord, you'll take care of it. What, posthumously? I said, the rate this is going, how slow I'm going and conquering this thing, I'm going to be dead by the time you ever get around to marking it. So that's my sense of humor coming back at him. So I went to bed. And here's something I didn't tell George. When I got up the next day, I turned the TV on. I have several TVs here. And I turned on the TV in my bedroom. I was not in my front office room, in my bedroom. And I turned it on. And Kevin, it was not on TBN the night before. It was on one of the other channels. But it was when I turned it on, because I turned it on and up comes TBN. I go, what's TBN doing on? I didn't have that on before I went to bed. And all of a sudden what's playing is the gal again from who said, go write the book. So she's appearing again going, there's a man who has just prayed, asking our Lord whether or not he should write the book. And she gives the whole spiel. And I turned the TV off and I said, I am not going to write it. So I walked away. And later on, I think it was that night, I came back and turned on another TV. And there it is again. What are the odds 3 times in a row of turning on the same recording? They're transmitting. And there she is again. There's a man who just prayed. And I said, all right. I said, I'll write the book. But I said, you got to take care of the money on this, man, because this is going to be costly. Science is expensive. So I said, how in the world am I going to do this, especially get the documented case studies? So I figured out a way, slowly but surely. And that would take a book in itself to try to explain the entire story of what I went through to
Okay.
make the book possible.
No, no, I can imagine the Master's Key was a giving birth process and much, much
You
more.
betcha.
Yeah, yeah. So for those who are interested in getting the book off your website, what are some of the what can people expect from that book? What is it you're covering in that book?
Okay, the beautiful thing about this book is the chronic disease process can be reduced down to a one process system that takes place in the body. And what happens when you're dead is your body starts to transform its animal cells into microplant life forms to get it ready for the soil. Now, this has never been put together. In all the science I've read, no one has ever put this together, and I put all the pieces together. And what happens when people get cancer, CFS, fibromyalgia, heart disease, all the rest of it, is because they're sinning against God's health laws, they will activate this process and it will start transforming the cells into these microplant life forms. And this is what cancer is all about. Cancer is actually a natural process that is created in the body. That's why there's never found a cure for it, because you can't cure it. You have to shut it off. You're not going to be able to stop it by changing the genome because it's a natural part of the programming so that our bodies, in fact, this process is in every living life form on the planet, so it will be transformed back into its atomic structure to be reused again in the recycling of energy on the planet. And God put a certain amount of energy onto the surface of the planet. So it has to be broken down and then reused. If he didn't have this process in place, we'd be walking on bodies for years to come because they'd never break down. That's how perfect he is, how well he builds everything. So he built this process. And I want to tell you something, that backs what the Jews and the Indians always said. They always said, put the body in the ground. Don't put it in a casket because it has to be taken back by the earth. And I learned as a scientist that's correct. It has to be reconverted back into its microplant life forms so that the cycle can continue. Then they grow up and become plants. They're reused again by other animals. Then when they die, it goes back again, and this wheel's going round and round and round. The problem is you're not supposed to turn the process on while you're alive. I mean, yeah, while you're alive. But it is supposed to be turned on while you're dead. And the problem is people are running into all of these issues with their bodies because they're living incorrectly and they're activating the process. Now, my book will teach them how that process works and also how they can utilize everything integratively from all the different healing sciences to take control of that whole thing, reverse the process, and regain their health. I did it. And I've done it with other people. And I show the evidence and documented case studies in the book so you and everyone else can see what you can expect to accomplish with your own body.
Right, absolutely. And how many pages is the book? I mean, obviously I've not had a chance to have a look at it because we just didn't have a chance to do that before we taped this. But what size is the book?
Well, the actual book's only about 373 pages, and there's a bit of a prelude to my background and other stuff that's in there. It's about another 27, I forget. It's about total 409 pages long, and it's single-spaced. Like a lot of information in there, so it's a lot of value for what you're buying. I didn't double space it because I wanted to get as much information across as I could. And that thing went through 200 rewrites. I mean, I kept working with people, helping them to get well, talking with them. I was in the trenches helping everyone while I was writing this thing. And I said, God, this has never been done before. How in the world do I talk to the doctors and the patients at the same time? This is new knowledge. I'm going to need new terminology to try to describe some of this stuff. So back and forth I went to finally, I settled down and I said, that's it. I'm not writing anymore.
Yeah. Well, so what are the key things in your book to the cure to cancer? Then, or not the cure, but the as you mentioned, stopping cancer.
Well, the key to doing it is to rebuild the light load of the body. When you use things like chemotherapy and radiation, Those are like generic forms of light that are being used to try to deal with cancerous tumors to break them down. But we need to go further into the light sciences, into the more specific spectrums of light that can be combined in combinations to be able to hit a cancerous tumor and shrink it in seconds. That's how fast God works when He does it.
Yeah, because you talk about a machine that that one day maybe I'll be able to be built to, clear cancer, basically.
Correct. Yeah. The machine I have in mind. See, what I did to my body was I built the electron load using what we have present today, and I used a lot of different things. I used the Beck protocol, yes, but I used many other things, including blast-somazone and microhydrin, everything that could build light load into the body. I used it, and the thing is with those methods, they're crude next to what can be built. In other words, what I mean by crude is it may take you about 2.5 years to 3 years to fully clear your body using what's present today. But I show, because I've established the premises I've done in science in my arguments in the book, I then take it into the fact that, hey, we could build a machine that'll flood the body with this kind of light and clear everything in a matter of minutes. Tumors would shrink rapidly, scar tissue would go away, new tissue would regrow at a tremendous speed. It's interesting about cells, Kevin, because when they multiply like that. They multiply so rapidly. And when you look at metastasis with cancer, how it works, cancer proves that cells can be replaced immediately. So when you look at a wound that heals, you have to ask yourself, why is that wound healing so slow when the cells can replicate so fast? See, there's a part of the process in the DNA that's been denied us that needs to be reactivated that'll make instant healing happen. But since we don't have that right now in our bodies because we're in this sinful mortal state that Jesus looks upon, we can build machines that will assist us to do that work that the Spirit of God would normally do. In other words, I'm competing against the Spirit of God in a sense. I see what the Spirit of God does. I see what the light does. Now, how can we do it in this world using our machines to do it, to bring grace and a blessing to mortal man? And that's the MREC that I talk about that you're referring to, a mild radiant electron cascade. And it's advanced science. It's advanced for this world, and I'm still working on the puzzle of it to how to work it out.
Right, absolutely. And I guess there's not any other books that you're working on right now. I suppose doing this particular book has, like I say, been a labor of love. Let me just say that. Did you have any other experiences since the second near death, or was that do you feel? Maybe I should ask this: do you feel that you're more connected now, and that you don't need to have a near-death experience to, speak to the all that is, in a sense, or that part of life?
Well, I talk, and they listen on the other side, and I see miracles happening all the time. Because of the continuing pain that I endure in the traumatized areas of my body, I get reassurance. I'll give you one example. This one I thought was one of the best ones. I went to my kitchen one night at midnight. I didn't turn the kitchen light on. I just put a plate down on the kitchen sink because I had something late in the evening to eat. And I looked up into the night sky, and there was only one cloud sitting in the sky. And Kevin, it was chiseled in the form of a male angel to perfection, with the arms folded over the chest, the wings expanded, and the feet flying. And this is the sign of I love you. And I'm looking at this thing going, oh my God. I said, do I want to pull my camera out and try to photograph this thing? No one's going to believe this. I thought, oh, forget it. It's for my eyes only.
Yeah, it's for you only. That sort of confirmation is, yeah, absolutely. And this personal experience. I mean, you could never prove it to anyone. This is what you've been through personally, and
right.
I mean, how has over the many years has it transformed you as a person and your view on, like how we treat another, how we want to treat another as we would like to be treated. Love is the only answer in a sense. Those things that have been around forever, but are probably so true.
Well, I don't see things the way the living do at all. I used to before the first death encounter. Even when I look at the periodic chart of elements, it's not a chemical chart to me. It's a chart of light particles that have consciousness in them, and when strung together, can become amazing things. Um, but when I look at the world around me, I have nothing but pain in my heart, sadly enough, because I can feel what others are feeling. I'm so empathic, and I can see the darkness in them, and it just breaks my heart. And when I see others physically suffering from their disabilities and whatever they're going through, um, even when I go shopping, I have to use an electric scooter to get around Ralph's Market, but I'm always kind to everyone and patient with everyone. They're all in their little worlds. They don't see me in my scooter. And I just, in fact, one man, I remember one day this gal comes right in front of me and she's right at the dairy section. She's got her iPods, and she's listening. And I'm sitting there waiting patiently for her, going, God, when can I have access, And finally, she turns around. She doesn't notice me at all, and she walks away. Suddenly, I feel a hand on my back patting me, and this man that's about my age is smiling at me, looking at me, saying, for being so patient with her. You're to be commended because she didn't deserve it, is what he's trying to say. And because she was so self-centered and too busy with her own stuff. And this is how I am with everyone that's around me. The other thing that mystifies me is at times when I walk up to people, I suddenly can read their life in detail. And I know that's coming from the light. In fact, I walked into a photo place, Kinko's photo shop here one time, and I'm standing in line, and there's this gal right behind me. And suddenly I looked at her and I looked at her, I said, you have a husband, you have 2 children, one's 2, one's 4, one's a boy, one's a girl. I'm going like this to her, right? And then I detailed out her troubles and problems. And she said, whoa, how did you know that? I said, I've been dead. She starts to laugh. She says, we have to talk. I said, yes, I think God is telling me to help you, which is why he just showed me enough to get your attention. So we sat down and I listened to her story and then proceeded to try to give her some guidance on all of that. So I get those moments that happen, but they're inconsistent. They don't happen all the time. So the only thing yeah, go ahead. No.
Well, no, I was just going to say there. No, if a lot of us, could experience what you had experienced, the world would be such a different place.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Did
mean,
you know, Kevin? I was going to say, when I was in the light, the euphoria that you feel, the peace, we cut ourselves off from that through the whole issue of sin. I think if everyone could feel that 24/7, no one would ever take another drug. No one would ever be nasty or unkind. We'd all be laughing with each other. Even if somebody, made a mistake or hit you or something,
yeah.
you'd be laughing at it.
Well,
So, no, blow it off.
we've been through trying times just recently with, the lockdown and everything else and the worldwide, corona issue. What's your take on that from your perspective?
Well, my only issue with that is that the coronavirus, here's the problem with Western medicine. Their idea of a cure is a vaccine. They don't have drugs for viruses. But the one thing they won't tell the public is the knowledge that's in electromedicine. And that's kept underground for the most part. When the AIDS virus was released into the world, they didn't have a cure for that yet. If you flood the body with electrons, it blinds the receptor sites of any virus, so it can't even get inside of the cell. So all the people that died, the hundreds of millions that died, they never needed to die because we had the knowledge to be able to save them. But this is the evil part of the Western medical system, with their trying to keep the money coming in, keep the doctors working, keep renewable income coming in with the drugs and the surgery aspect. So when it comes to the coronavirus, I watch these people I watch on TV. I watched this one gal. She was recording herself every single night till the moment of her death. She died of respiratory failure. And I looked at that death and I said how unnecessary that was. Because all we had to do was smack the Beck blood electrifier onto her and flood her body with electrons, and we could have reduced that viral load in 24 hours down to almost nothing, and then keep it going until her body's immune system overcame, and she'd be alive right now. So that's the lie part that's going on in my mind.
Well, I'm sure you're trying to reach the right people with this message, and I'm sure there's people that come across your path that are interested in what you've got to say, interested in the work that you're doing and have done, and the message that you've got, which is amazing as well. Just remind us two things. What is the most important message, first of all, of your story, of your journey so far, do you think?
As hard as it is to make it through this world, we need to try to be compassionate with each other and try to see each other's point of view more. I wrestle with it in myself for what the grocer did to me and my body. And it's hard to forgive when they don't even want the forgiveness. But if you don't do it, then you wind up becoming enslaved to that unforgiveness. And that takes a lot of love. So through all of this, I'm learning to love at a much higher capacity because I'm trying to help save a world that's blind to what it is doing to itself, not only in medicine, but also what it's doing to itself and each other in terms of love.
Absolutely.
Towards one another.
And your website one more time is
kffmenterprises.com. Just go under the healthcare tab, look at where it says books, ebooks, and click on that, and you'll see my book, The Master's Key, and you'll see Dr. Santee's book, Prostate Relief Now.
Well, Kevin Montague, I want to say thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your amazing story. There's so much more to your story, so much more. But I think we've, got the most important bits in there. And thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Kevin, for inviting me. Appreciate it.